Standing on the western edge of the East Anglian town of Thetford are the remains of one of medieval England's greatest religious houses. The Priory of Our Lady at Thetford is barely visible from the road, but if you step through the gate and walk across the parkland, you'll find yourself among ruins that speak to far more than what remains. The Priory story begins in 1103 with a man named Roger of Norfolk. Roger was no ordinary knight. His father had come over with William the Conqueror and, according to legend, had saved William's life from an assassination plot. For that loyalty, his family were rewarded a spectacular fortune. In September 1107, Roger laid the foundation stone of a new priory dedicated to the Virgin Mary. He affiliated his new foundation with the Order of Cluny, one of the most powerful and prestigious monastic orders in Christendom at the time. The nave took 60 years to build. To understand Thetford Priory at its height, you have to understand what Cluniac monks actually did. Picture a likely day in the life of a monk here in the 14th century. Following an early rise for prayer, monks would rise again in the early morning in the dormitory. From here, they would progress downstairs and reach the cloister. Progressing round the cloister, the monks would move in silence to reach the priory church. Once here, they would partake in a brief service before moving to the chancel and the high altar to receive communion. After this, the monks would process from the church to the chapter house, sitting on benches along the walls to hear announcements from the prior for the day ahead. From here, they'd head to the refectory, sitting at long tables, benches facing inward to eat breakfast in silence. Following this, the monks would then disperse to their assigned work. Some would head to the kitchens and infirmary to prepare meals and bake bread or care for the sick amongst their ranks. Some would head to the gardens or the meadowland beyond the precinct wall. Here in red, you can see the lodgings of the prior. During its history, the priory had at least 25 priors, responsible for things including handling estate business and records and accounts. After a morning spent at work, the monks would return to the church for a brief service, before again returning to the refectory for dinner. Work then resumed in the afternoon. In the evening, the monks returned to the church for evening and later night prayer, before the final walk to the refectory for a light supper. Following this, most of the monks would then retire to the dormitory, to go to sleep in silence and begin the routine again the following day. Thetford Priory, at its peak in the late 13th and 14th century, housed around 22 monks. It was immensely wealthy and owned lands across Norfolk and Suffolk, controlling rents, tithes and offerings. It was simultaneously a landlord, an employer, and a destination of pilgrimage. And that last point was crucial. Sometime in the mid-13th century, something extraordinary happened at Thetford. The Virgin Mary, locals said, appeared to them in a vision, requesting that a chapel be added to the church. During its construction, the monks made a remarkable discovery. An old statue of the Virgin from the Priory's earlier site. The cult that grew around this statue was extraordinary. Pilgrims came from across East Anglia bringing offerings. They believed the statue had miraculous powers, and with pilgrims came money, donations, gifts, and offerings that flowed into the priory's coffers. The turning point for the priory came in 1306, when the last Roger of Norfolk died, with his estates passing to the crown, and then through marriage and inheritance to the Dukes of Norfolk, the infamous Howard family. For the next 2 centuries, Thetford Priory became something different. It became the mausoleum of one of England's most famous noble families. The Howard tombs filled the church. Members of the dynasty were buried here across generations. By the early 16th century, the 3rd Duke of Norfolk was preparing not only his own tomb at Thetford, but one for the king's own illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, the Duke of Richmond and Somerset. But by then, the walls were closing in. Henry VIII's break with Rome in the 1530s set in motion one of the most dramatic upheavals in English history. Deciding the monasteries were obstacles to his authority, the crown began systematically dissolving them. But the 3rd Duke of Norfolk fought back. The priory, he said, was the resting place of his ancestors. It was where Henry Fitzroy lay buried. He proposed converting it into a collegiate church, but the king rejected his petition. And on the 16th of February 1540, the last prior and 16 monks surrendered to the king's commissioners. The priory at Thetford, which has stood for 437 years, which had hosted kings and nobles, which had been the spiritual heart of East Anglian Catholicism, was dissolved.